Hello, welcome to Storytime, because I keep having to remind myself today is Tuesday, which means it's story time. So welcome. Take a deep breath and ground into this moment. I hope that you had a beautiful Thanksgiving celebration, whatever that means for you and yours. And as we're in this kind of transition once again, isn't that the story of life? Is that just as we complete one, we begin again on something else. And so today we'll conclude kind of this month-long journey of exploring gratitude with hopefully what will be an encouragement to continue the practice. So the story that I want to share with you is actually one that's a bit tender still, literally and figuratively, in the sense that I want to talk about the benefits of gratitude, but in the sense that you got to stick with it long enough, which research tells us that the first 30 days of a daily practice is just the foundations for kind of flexing the muscles to do that practice. Now, I've been a guitar practicing amateur for the last almost 2 weeks. I think tomorrow will be 2 weeks. And my fingers hurt so bad that when I was making my Thanksgiving dinner for my family, I had to ask for help because I didn't trust my grip. The first 3 fingers are numb to the first knuckle. Now, what this has helped me to remember is that discipline is a strength of mine, sticking to something. Once I commit, I am in it for the long haul. Now, I recognize that for many of my students, and particularly my coaching clients, that's not the case. They struggle with finding the discipline to do the thing long enough to reap the benefits. So one side or the other, all or nothing is never the strategy. So I'm having to be okay with an every other or even an every third day for the physical practice of pressing fingers into the guitar strings. Now, on those non-pressing the finger days is really a day of rest. And if I need a second day, then that is a day of just making the shapes without pressing so that I can keep that muscle memory going. This is a way to kind of temper the fiery discipline that is of my pitta, that's an Ayurvedic term, my pitta spirit of all or nothing mentality, me being all. So if you have an all or nothing mentality that leans towards that nothing, there is strong research to support the idea of an intermittent practice being actually the most powerful practice to shortcut, as I talked about last week, in the terms of that if we don't overdo it, if we kind of sprinkle gratitude practice into our life, not too regimented, not too much to control, we actually get more benefit because it's less rote and more from inspiration. And yet what happens if inspiration doesn't show up for a week or a month or a year? Just like the guitar, my fingers might be happier, but I'm not going to be any more skilled at executing the practice of guitar. I've tried to mix those two together, the practice of gratitude and the practice of guitar. So when we can stay with the practice, right? When we can stay with the practice over that 30 days, something magical happens in terms of time being the magical ingredient, the extra ingredient. And there's not really anything other than just being in that time space that something shifts. And it usually happens between about 90 and 120 days. Now, that's going to take us into the new year. This is one of the reasons why I love to celebrate gratitude all month long in November, so that we've got essentially 8 to 9 weeks to get us into the first of the year. And as the new year begins, I'm offering a mini retreat on January 1st to help propel us over the hump of the new year and maybe recovering from the hangover of whatever our celebration was, so that we can begin again in January with the same fervor, with the same passion that we have leading up to the sore fingers or the sore muscles before we slide into the self-doubt that comes in. It's not working. I'm not more joyful. I'm not an expert guitarist. Well, this takes time. This is the practice and the unfolding that happens as we continue to show up even when we don't want to. So we talked about how to stay in the practice, those tips to stay in the practice. The benefits of gratitude are not just that we will feel more joy, we will feel more desire to express joy. We actually have an improvement in our sleep when we practice gratitude. We have an increase in the feelings of happiness and a positive mood, which in itself will fuel our practice, the intentional practice of showing up for gratitude. Gratitude as a practice will reduce stress. And this is the overstress, not the healthy stress, that's eustress, but in the sense that stress that leads to burnout, that leads to depression, and specifically the symptoms of PTSD, whatever the cause of our post-traumatic stress disorder, that gratitude as a practice can help alleviate and soften what might be still lingering in terms of the consequences of those conditions. And alongside, it actually, the practice of gratitude, especially when we do it when we don't wanna, we show up anyway, we do it when our fingers are numb and make the gesture, even if we can't fully engage in the action of pressing. This will actually increase our resilience to the stressors of our lives as well. In which case, when bad things happen, we don't assume that another bad thing, when's the next shoe going to drop? And we can learn to recalibrate what Brene Brown calls the foreboding joy, the protection status of feeling our joy, because this too shall pass. Now, this too shall pass, whether it's joy or sorrow, whether it's pain or celebration, yes. But by practicing gratitude, we help solidify in our brain, in our long-term memory, that which matters most. What we repeat, what we retell, what we engage in re-experiencing without having to relive. And that's a distinction that I want to make clear here, in the sense that our gratitude practice is not reliving what we have been through, but it is a way of rewiring so that we can remember the highlights, the beneficial components. Again, this is not meant to deny or to ignore or even to give permission to a wrong or a wrongdoer from our story, from our past, but rather than to choose how we're going to use that experience to our benefit and to have a benefit or perhaps an extension of that service to others. My favorite benefit of the gratitude practice is actually that it is correlated to our relationship with hope. And hope for me is love in action, love in anticipation. Now, you can challenge that definition, it doesn't really matter. The idea is that hope is about believing that what's to come is going to be worth showing up for. In other words, I got to make it through today so I can show up for what's next. And showing up is really just a matter of breathing and putting ourselves in the place that inspiration can find us by doing the practice consistently enough so that inspiration finds us in that space. We can't chase love. We can't chase gratitude. We can't chase the feelings that we hunger for. We got to cultivate the space and let them arrive by way of our allowing. This is why the yoga is such a beautiful practice, to cultivate an intimacy with gratitude, which interestingly enough brings us to that happiness place, that brings us to a more deep intimacy with what the yogis called bliss or ananda, that union, that remembering that all of the story matters, that all of the contributors have an opportunity to speak, to give their voice. Now, it's our job to discern whose voices we listen to, right, and integrate, and whose voices we recognize as their right to have that opinion. but it doesn't need to influence my practice. How do I discern? Well, those that help to cultivate joy, who help to cultivate thanksgiving, versus those who cultivate shame or guilt or burden or disappointment. Again, that's very different than those who are inspiring us to be our best selves and challenge us. We may not want to hear that. We might not have gratitude for the fact that, hey, you know what? This is something that you said you do and you haven't done it. It would really be helpful if you'd follow through, right? On the surface, that feels a little heavy, much like I do to myself when on my to-do list it says practice guitar or practice breathing or send that thank you note. And it gets to the end of the day and I haven't done it. And I'm like, oh. So I have a choice. Do I wallow in that sense of defeat? Or do I use that reminder as a beginning again, in the sense that, do I want to get it done before I sleep? Is there wisdom in doing that task? If it's a small task, like maybe sending a thank you note doesn't take me very long, then maybe I do that before I go to sleep. If it can't be done tonight, then I make a conscious choice to reschedule that event, including those things that I want as a daily practice. And this is where wisdom of doing this practice for now nearing on 3 decades of prioritizing my to-do list. Stephen Covey and Franklin Covey now is the business that makes these calendars and schedules, taught me to prioritize A, B, and C, meaning that which, if I don't do today, will make tomorrow less effective, less good, less yummy, however you want to define the quality of your daily living. So in the sense that if I miss guitar practice today, now notice I said miss. If I miss guitar practice today, that's a very different consequence than if I choose not to practice today and delay that practice for tomorrow. The power of this difference is in choice, which is ultimately why thankfulness is the feeling. Gratitude is a choice of cultivating that practice, even in the absence of that feeling. So, in the absence of feeling in my fingers, I'm choosing to skip a day of practice. In fact, today I'm hoping to return to the guitar practice because I've had 2 days of rest. They're still a little sore and numb, but I can feel them now as I touch. Notice for yourself in the sense that 1 day of gratitude practice, 1 day of a new practice doesn't reap all the rewards. But when we first start a practice, we're still kind of elated that we even did it, that we even showed up, that I held the guitar in my hands. In fact, I couldn't help send a message to my friends and to my family, like, I played my first song today, or I played guitar today. It's bad. Don't get me wrong. My guitar playing is bad, but I'm going to trust, this is where hope comes in, that if I continue this practice, particularly this practice in wisdom, right, which is some days I press on the chords, some days I don't. Some days I show up, some days I tickle the edge of my skill, and some days I just simply do the bare minimum, right? But as long as you're showing up, then gratitude, whatever it is that you practice, will continue to get stronger, to get more potent, to bring you closer to the state of ease, which ironically, sukha is the sweetness, is often how we define the ananda, that bliss state as well. We begin by eliminating the suffering, then we sprinkle in some neutral sensation. This is where discipline really takes its toll, or really takes makes its advantage, right? That I don't yet have the reaping of the reward yet, but I have the discipline to stick to it. This is where a coach, this is where an accountability partner helps you stay the course, right? So that when the benefit comes in, I don't want to skip a day of my breathing practice. I don't want to skip a day of my breathe, move, rest practice, because although tomorrow won't be bad, I know I can make it a day, even a couple of days without doing those practices. I know that my resilience is less when I don't do those daily practices. So even if it's in my bed as I'm slowly falling into sleep, I do a light dasha shalana, a simple twisting, a simple breathing, a simple memory of, can I find the A chord? Can I find the D chord with my fingers, even if I'm not pressing into the chord? Just that little bit of extra effort is what keeps us in the practice, keeps us in that integrity of I did my best based on the capacity that I had available, so that tomorrow I can choose to show up again rather than feeling the heaviness of overwork, in which case I can't show up at all. This is the wisdom. This is where our practice meets wisdom, and we can choose wisely. The witness helps to propel that. So, benefits take time, absolutely. Generally speaking, somewhere between 90 and 120 days. To get through those first 30, 60 days is why we advocate for a 30-day challenge. And then we invite to extend that challenge for a second month. Why? So that the discipline gets stronger, the muscles get familiar. But then an accountability partner or a coach to help you sustain that, so that you can start to notice when things get hard. I just don't want it today. Okay, can you do it anyway? Tomorrow? Is it any easier? I just don't want to do it today either. Okay, you don't have to like it. You don't even have to want to. But do you want to enough to even do a little bit? A little bit of yoga goes a long way. A little bit of gratitude is like planting a seed, buried underground, covered in soil, watered gently. Over time, it will ripen. It will grow. It will blossom forth. But if you don't know that that's how a seed grows, why would you put a seed in the soil? So I'm telling you, plant the seed of gratitude and trust that when you plant that seed, it will grow as long as you nurture it. And nurturing, my friends, is practicing. Before you move on to what's next, I challenge you to consider, how do you want to take this gratitude practice forward? As we wrap up the month of November, and December, we'll start our introspection journey, our preparation for the new year. Now, Storytime and Coaches Chat, for that matter, and the studio will take a longer break towards the end of the month of December. So I want you to start now to begin again. Clarify how you want to practice gratitude and take it into your next 30 days, your next right step of living in greater alignment and greater intimacy with prana. If I can be of help, please reach out. That's my life's work. That's what I love to do, is to help you along your path. And when we meet, let us meet in union, knowing that we show up ready to do the work of deepening this intimacy with prana together. May you breathe deeply and move freely, labor lovingly, so you may live vibrantly. I am so grateful for you. Namaste.